this special episode, we find out what happens when branding legend JD Lacroix takes over the RebelRebel podcast and turns the mic on me. This time, the storyteller becomes the story, diving into the making of Brand Jitsu and the art of finding the truth and clarity in business.
RebelRebel is brought to you by my book, Brand Jitsu. Most brands blend in. They don't mean to, but they do. After 25 years of helping people fix that, I wrote the playbook. It's called Brand Jitsu, Move Your Brand from Meh to Memorable. It'll show you how to shape your story so it hits and sticks. Grab a copy at your favorite bookstore or head to brandjitsu.com.
Well, welcome to the RebelRebel. I'm not your host, Michael Dargie. Today, that's going to be Jean-Pierre, and I'm just going to turn it over to him because this is like a takeover show. What?
Yeah. Shoes on the other foot, Michael. Finally. Eh?
Right.
So I had a chance to read your book. I actually devoured your book. It was amazing.
Oh, thank
Fantastic. You. And I'm here really to probe. I had some questions when I was reading your book and wanted to use this platform to get some answers, and hopefully the audience out there will gain some insights and hopefully go out and buy your book because it's definitely worth a read. Absolutely. Oh. I devoured it. I read the book in a week. Yeah. Cover to cover. And
that is high praise, sir.
And Michael, I've been doing brand transformation for over 40 years. And your book is the best book I have read on positioning. And it applies, and you go deep in your book on all the elements that define a great position. And it's easy to follow. If I was a small business person starting my own business or a startup, or I'm a large an executive in a large corporation, I would find your book very insightful. And so the audience, and we'll get to that, but let's start by, why did you write this? Why did you write this book?
I didn't mean to.
You didn't mean to.
I didn't mean to.
Accidental author.
Yeah. My first book, JP, was really supposed to be like a nonfiction adventure book on the West Coast. And it just didn't turn out that way. It ended up being a business book on branding. But the reason why I wrote it, and it took me a long time to get it there. I probably was writing it for about 10 years. And I was talking about it for the last 5, and it finally got done in the last 2. So I guess the Reader's Digest condensed version is, this is the stuff I take my clients through over and over and over again. And they're always asking, I just want a new logo. And I'm just like, well, that's cool. And we just need a website. We just need a piece of marketing collateral. I'm like, awesome. I love doing that. But we need to find out what is below the surface, like what drives you, what makes you who you are. And so having done this over and over and over again, I decided that I probably should put this in a book. I should get it out of my brain and give it to other people to do something with, because it's no good locked up in here if you can only see me once in your career, right? As a business, it'd be much better in the hands of other people. That's why I wrote it.
Well, that's fantastic. And who would be the key target group? When you wrote this book, you were thinking of certain clients or certain industry categories and
yeah. Well, okay. So if we flash back to 2000 to 2005, when I was working as a communications director for Service Intelligence, we worked with huge brands like the monsters. They could use this, but that's not why I wrote it. I wrote it for the entrepreneur, for the artist, heck, for the scientists who have to get their story across. The small businesses, the SMEs that don't have a gigantic budget to get this done, and they don't have a lot of time to get it done. They need to hit the ground running right away. So that's really who I wrote it for.
Wow. When I read your book, you go deep in all of the different elements of positioning. I mean, truly, Jitsu is, learning process. And how did you come up with that name, Brand Jitsu? At first, I thought it was a course on self-defense. Is it branding self-defense?
Yeah, I can see that. So in another life, I spent 20 years teaching Japanese jiu-jitsu. And the main tenet of that martial art is to stop an attack, prevent further attack as quickly as possible. So, the fundamentals there are if it's going to take longer than 3 minutes to learn a technique to defend yourself, it's going to be useless to you in combat. So, we had taught the city police, we taught military, we taught security services how to end that situation quickly and effectively. So that's as far as jujitsu goes in the brand jitsu metaphor. It is fast, it's effective, it can be used immediately right out of the box. You don't have to sit on a mountaintop contemplating your navel for 6 months to get there. And brand to me is story. That's all it means to me, is the story, the core of the story. So if you take the two together, it's like and jitsu, pardon me, in Japanese means technique, art or technique.
Okay.
So the idea is that this is the art or technique of story.
Well, it's fantastic. And you definitely go deep into storytelling, but your book starts off with business model. And so that's quite, when I was starting to read that, I'm going, wow, that's definitely for a novice. That would be a bold step to start looking at the business model. So why did you start there?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I necessarily start there. It's certainly part of the fundamentals of it, because the business model canvas is something you need to be aware of. If you're not, you should look it up. It's an amazing tool for you to understand all the aspects of your business. But value proposition and customer segment are the two pieces that I care most about that puzzle, because that is I think where the rubber hits the road, and that's the sort of the genesis of your brand. And if we go down deep into the world's cheesiest metaphor, which when you get the book you'll know this, it's this iceberg. It's all the stuff below the surface, not the outward expression of your brand, which is where the penguins live. It's below the surface where the majestic narwhals and anglerfish hang out.
Well, I love the metaphor, because, that underneath the waterline is the biggest part of the iceberg. And it's what defines what's on top.
Yeah.
And so it's great that you talk about value proposition and customer segments, because that is, I would say, half the book. And so let's talk about value proposition, because you could go into deep about how to define the value proposition. You give some great examples, value propositions, and then you take that and you build the brand position. So walk me through how someone would read the book and understand value proposition, because there's some confusion in the marketplace between value propositions and a brand values. And there's a lot of confusion. Right. I've been to many meetings where the client goes, these are our brand values. Well, that's great, but that's not your value proposition. Right. What is your value proposition? No, we got the brand values. That's what it is. So explain the difference between the two, and then how that links to what we call the brand card.
I love it. Okay. So, the vision, purpose, values live on the lowest part of your iceberg. I've always thought about this from the standpoint that it starts from the very bottom and drives its way up through the iceberg till you break through the surface like the majestic narwhal that you are. Purpose and values, I mean, those are two different things, but let's just take one of them. So purpose is your reason for being. That's the core of why you're doing what you're doing. Values are that sort of sets up the guardrails for how you're going to do that. It allows you some latitude to be, are we going to be this type of company or this type of company? And, as you drive towards your purpose, it's good to have those guardrails up to be like, okay, we are not going to do this to, it's a good example. If you value honesty, for example, I mean, that's a great value, but it's much better to show that instead of tell that. But, and I think that sometimes if we go back a step, in the values work that I do in the book, I suggest that you pick 3 values out of as many values as there are in the world. You only get 3. And why do you only get 3? Because otherwise it's overwhelming. You can have as many as you want, but I like to give even more guardrails to you to be like, what's actually important to how you pursue business? Is it authenticity? What is it exactly? Because those will be rooted into everything that you do. Are you courageous? Are you brave? Are you like, what are those things? And then that then informs the purpose or how you show up to deliver your purpose. Now, further to your question, what's the value proposition? That's the reason why people choose you. So that is, you've got all this other stuff that you're aligning yourself with your person, your perfect customer, your ICP, if you will. But they're only going to choose you, if you know, if your value proposition connects with what they need and you connect with what they want in a transaction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's really what you get at in your book is really not only defining what the value, why would somebody select you versus the competitor, but it's also how does it differentiate you and how do you live those values across the way you execute or go to market. I thought that was very insightful in your book.
Thank you.
And then when you look at personas or target group, you talk a lot about personas. I was amazed, like, you must have a psychology degree because you get deep into these different. So let me ask you,
yeah,
if we were to define you as a persona, what would be the characteristics for our audience of you as a persona?
Oh gosh. Well, so okay, so a bunch of things go into that, I suppose. Like if we look at the brand archetype or the archetype of my company, for example, Make More Creative, different ever so slightly than the archetype of Michael Dargie, the writer and the speaker and the whatever. But a creative rebel is certainly on the cards there. Maybe explorer, actually, probably even better. So creator, explorer are the two archetypes I identify with deeply. And I fight between which one is more important. And this is covered in the book as well. Like, what's your primary archetype and what's the secondary archetype? And sometimes a secondary archetype is more important than the primary. If that makes any sense. So if I show up as this creator as my primary archetype, then I'm driving, I'm making stuff. It's like it's lightning in a bottle. And it's fueled by the explorer because I'm like taking all this stuff from all these different places. That's a really powerful creator. If I flip the script and I'm an explorer and I'm just out there exploring and doing stuff and experiencing, but I'm supported by the creator archetype, then it trickles up differently. So it shows up differently.
So tell me, why is that important? If that, because that's a huge exercise to define your target group archetypes. But why is that so important?
Well, it comes down to okay. So if we go up through the iceberg, we've got these, vision, purpose, values is one strata. And then above that is the DNA, which is what do you do? Why do you do it? Who do you do it for? Why do they care? Another strata. Above that is your brand personality, which is where this lives. And this is who you are. We're making a person. When we create a brand or we embody a brand, it's a brand new person that we're creating. So how are they going to walk? How are they going to talk? How are they going to act? How are they going to show up in the world so that you either attract the right people or you detract the right people? Like we're always in this constant battle of who are we attracting and who are we repelling? And you can only know that for sure if you know who you are inside as a brand. Like as a human, I know who my tribe is. And as a business, you should also know that. So that's why that work is so important, because otherwise you just get pulled hither and yon, being like, oh, okay, maybe I'll be this today. Maybe I'll be that today.
Sounds like part of the exercise is to bring greater focus on the things you're going to do and the things you're not going to do. Is that part of the premise of the book?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It is how you show up and how you deal with stuff that's not for you. Because I think that's another big part of this puzzle as you go through it, is that you get to decide who you're not.
Yeah, and as a startup or an entrepreneurial company, we're always attracted to the shiny new object. And, today we're this, and then tomorrow, oh, that looks exciting. We'll go over there. So it really is helping put the guardrails on where you're allowed to play and where you're allowed to win. Am I correct?
Yep, 100%. And we do this work with companies, and they've got worksheets that they have, and we create a brand book at the end of it. So they've got this, playbook that they have, so that a year down the road, we can go back and go through these same exercises and see if the levers have changed, or see if the reality has changed, because we often think that it is one thing as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, whatever, just like, oh, 100%, it is this. And then you get 6 months down the road, a year down the road, it's just like, oh my God, it's not that at all. And then how do we pivot that? How do we change it without throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
Now, part of the book, you spent a lot of time on storytelling. Obviously, Jitsu is about our brand is about storytelling. And so why is storytelling so important?
Well, it's how we connect with people, and story. It doesn't have to be a long story. I think that's the beauty of it, is that once you have once you've crystallized what's sort of below the surface, that story can be pretty darn short. Like if you look at one of my favorite examples in this whole thing is the Nike example. One of their first ads was, "There is no finish line." I get chills still to this day. And it's, like, that is a story, and it's a story encapsulated in this one sentence, but it says everything you need to know about the brand itself and what it represents and who it's for. And any athlete, any musician, anybody who's done anything that knows that you don't stop when you see the finish line, or you always keep training or pushing it to the next thing, you get it viscerally. There wasn't even a picture of a shoe in that ad.
Mm-hmm. They just changed their tagline. Have you heard that?
No.
Oh, they just changed. I think they moved from "just do it" to "why do it." And they just changed because they wanted to be more inclusive. That not everyone's an athlete. Yeah, interesting.
But their brand promise was, to innovate and inspire every athlete in the world. Asterisks, if you have a body, you're an athlete. Yeah,
so it's interesting that even well-established brands who have very strong value proposition are tinkering with their messaging, which is part of your book. You talk about how you take the brand story and all of these elements and you bring it to life in your communication. Talk a little bit about that, because that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where all this great work in that binder come to life, right?
Yeah. One of the, I guess, best examples is I was working with a funeral home company called Pearson's, and they're local, and just lovely, lovely people. And they didn't know that they knew that they needed to pivot or change their brand a little bit. It's a funeral home. But what do you do? Because it's a commoditized market. Everybody's out there selling the same thing. And, how are they going to stand out? So it was going through this process where we really dug deep. And it's a very difficult 2-day process. Like after 6 hours of this type of work, your head is exploded. And and Post-it notes are everywhere. You're covered in pixels. And but when we'd gotten through this work and they are so game to do it, we dug into every little nook and cranny of why they do what they do. What are they actually doing? Like what do they do? Like, it's just not burying bodies or burning them. It's like, do you know what I mean? It's not just treating people in grief. It's like, it's all this other stuff. And it was through this work, and once we had the brand playbook, that this thing bubbled up called Life by Mary, which was this campaign that we ran here in Calgary. Very, very successful, which showed this just amazing elderly woman carrying a surfboard on a beach. And it just says Life by Mary, Celebrations by Pearson's. And that, to me, it gives me chills now, because it's about the life you live. It's not about necessarily who you leave behind, but it's about that celebration of life after. So it's more of a rallying cry to live your best life while you're here, so that you can have a hell of a good party when you're gone.
Yeah. But you're really hitting an interesting point. And that point is, that an organization isn't selling product or service. It's selling a solution to a customer or a client's needs. Yeah. And very often those solutions are emotional. So how do you factor the emotional needs as part of this exercise?
Yeah, well, yeah. And as we get up higher into as we get closer to the surface and we get into the customer story, and it's like, it is the hero story. And I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here, like Joseph Campbell and stuff like this, right? Like this is meaningful work, because we are not, as a business, it's not about you. It is about your customer. You are, I had so much fun writing this in the book, but you are the Yoda to,
Yeah. I love
to
that
the,
analogy. That's
to the
great.
Luke
Yeah.
Skywalker, Princess Leia.
Yeah.
They need the Force. You've got the Force. You're going to teach them the Force. They're going to go off and use the Force to defeat the evil empire. That's their journey, and you're there to support them along the way. So I think that, if you can recognize that that's your role, and you can be there to, provide the tools that they need to get there, understand the pain that they're in, and how you might alleviate that pain, then it's a game changer.
So when you look at all of these different facets, I mean, is there a sequence of events that you go through to get to the end? And what does the end look like? So you talk about your playbook, but walk me through. I'm a client. I've got this new widget here, and and I need to market this, and I'm a novice. So what would be the journey working with you?
Great question. Thank you for asking. So it is a 2-week process that we go through with our clients typically. So typically we do a 4 to 8 hour, usually it lands around the 6 hour, with the C-level, the C-suite, the people who are driving the vision. And we go through the brand DNA is the most important part of this whole thing. Like we do have, we define the vision, like where are you going? What's the big, hairy, audacious goal? Like what does that look like? We're not solving for that. We just want to know what it is. What's your purpose? Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And what are the values that are constraining you? And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like, what are those guardrails that are just like, you will never do this and you'll always do that question. Once we establish that, because I do believe that has to come from up on high. That's what is driving down through the organization. Then you get to the brand DNA. And I'll tell you a quick story about where that came from. So I do improv theater with one of the most renowned companies on the planet for such a thing called Loose Moose. I think you have Bad Dog in Toronto. A lot of our alum go there and play in Toronto. But the idea is that Keith Johnstone, one of the founders, said that when you go on stage, you have about 30 seconds where you can do whatever you want and the audience will be with you. So that's cool. So in improv theater, you don't know what you're doing. The audience doesn't know what you're doing. So usually the audience is like doing this and they're sitting back in their chair as they wait to find out what happens. So Keith says you have to create a platform. Who are you? Where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? And what's your relationship? If you can establish that within 30 seconds-ish, the audience will understand the circle of expectations. Where can this story go? And the audience then goes from here and they start leaning forward. You can actually see it happen when you get there. It's really cool. So if I'm like, I go on a stage, JP and I are on stage and I'm just like doing this thing. And I'm like, hey, JP, have you seen Dad? Right? Within 2 seconds, we know you and I are brothers. We're outside. And if I've done my work right, I'm digging a hole. Now we know where that story can go. Right.
Yeah.
And then you might go, I thought you had him, which changes the dynamic. Then that becomes an emotional change in the story, which is super fun. That's called the tilt.
Yeah.
But if we take this concept of a platform and apply it to business, which is what I purport brand DNA is, you just need, what do you do? Why do you do it? Who do you do it for? Why do they care? Answer these 4 questions. No marketing spin, no bejazzlement. Nike, for example, would be, we make shoes to improve athletic performance. If we go back to when they actually just made shoes, there's nothing fancy about that at all. But that's the genesis. That's the bit that allows the thing to grow properly. Because if you get weird about it, if you're not super clear and not savage about removing marketing words and marketing speak in there, then, before you know it, you've got an arm growing out the top of your head for your brand.
Yeah. Well, that may work for the improv show.
It could.
Yeah, start that one. So, when you start this journey with a client, what are the challenges that you're faced with? What are the pitfalls that are the potholes that you have to watch out for when you're doing this?
It's a great question. And I don't know that I fully answered the other one, but I'll do this in the when we're working with the C-suite, like the CEOs, CFOs typically don't get involved. CMOs might, CTOs sometimes jump in. But the work itself is, imagine a huge piece of paper with these 4 questions on it. What do you do? Why do you do it? Who do you do it for? Why do they care? And everybody gets Post-it notes. And I really do believe in tactile learning and playing with stickers. I especially love making presidents play with stickers because they love it.
Yeah.
But the idea is that on one Post-it, you can only write one thing. What do you do? Write one thing. Put it on the board. What else do you do? Write it down. Put it on the board. There's no wrong answers, but you can only have one thing per Post-it. And this goes back to business model canvas work, where you can only have one thing on a Post-it. It has to be on a Post-it so you can actually move it different places. You're not tied into it. So the pitfalls are this. At the end of the process, you can only have one Post-it in each box. And it is a fight for what goes on that Post-it. And I think it's some of the most important work I've ever seen in my entire career is fighting for words, fighting for what word makes sense. I was working with a company, as an example, and we did this with their C-suite. We had 4 hours just to answer these 4 questions, just those 4. And they were burnt out at the end. I was out of town at their place. At the end of it, we take all the stuff that we learned, we put it into what's the start of the brand playbook to check assumptions. Like, is this still right? Because we put a week between one in-person session and the second, because it's crucial to have time to percolate and understand what just happened.
Seeding.
And what's that?
Seeding. We call that seeding.
Yeah. So, Thursday, I get a call from the CEO. He's just like, Mike, it's not this. We need to use the word that. It changes everything. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what that phrase was, but it was one word, it was one thing, and it changed everything. It changed the entire dynamic and approach to how we are going to then start telling that story. Just that one little thing. And so that's what I find. It's not a hard sell to be in front of people, just like, this is the work that we have to do. Trust me. Like, this is what we're going to go here, and you're going to be fine, and it's going to be uncomfortable. But the end of it is going to be something that you have never seen before. You didn't even imagine you could be that clear. Because I mean, really, all we're doing for this whole thing, truth and clarity. That's all the bottom stuff is truth and clarity.
But it's interesting. I don't know if you find that no matter the size of the organization, there's no alignment on what that truth and clarity is. And I guess that's the value you bring, is that you synthesize these different perspectives into one.
Yeah. And one of the most amazing things that we do on day 2, which is when we get the C-suite and the leadership team in, is we go through the brand personality worksheet, which is the spectrum, masculine to feminine, elite to mass appeal, like all this stuff. Everybody in the room gets stickers and they all get sheets, and they go through each one of these things. And there's a variety of different ways to do this, but it's either brand now or brand future. So oftentimes we'll do brand now. Like, what is your brand now? And everybody puts a dot down. Then everybody gets to go around the room and explain why they put the dot where it is. And we put it up on the board. We use Miro so everybody can sort of see where they're represented. And everybody has a voice at that table, and there's no wrong answers. And then as soon as we're done one spectrum, then we'll be like, all right, we'll come to a consensus, because oftentimes they're stretched all over. But one person is thinking masculine is this, another person's thinking feminine is that. And once you have that conversation, they're just like, oh, okay, we're a 1 masculine, not a 3. Or, and I try to keep people away from the messy middle. You don't get to just choose the middle, because that's
safe.
Awful.
Yeah.
Right? Challenge yourself a little bit. And then we do brand future. Where do you want the brand to be? Like, now that we've got these levers in front of us, we want to, if we realize, let's say we're a 3 masculine out of 5. How do we move that lever to a 2 feminine? And what does that mean? And how is that then going to affect, we're a 5 elite, not everybody can get us, but we're like a 4 rebel. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's all these different levers for us to push and pull, which then creates really interesting shape of a human or like a brand identity. But it also aligns people. I've never seen anything like it align a leadership team together. And everybody's now pulling in the same direction because they all have the same language where they can actually be speaking, being like, yeah, we're this because of that, because we had that conversation. And again, that's a big conversation to have, but it's meaningful.
Yeah. So, you've got group dynamics happening. And very often, if you got the CEO in the room, people kind of kowtow to, trying to kind of judge what that individual is thinking. How do you break that down? Those group dynamics.
I've been very fortunate that the CEOs, and I don't know, maybe I attract this kind of work, but the CEOs tend to not have ego, or in the right circumstance for the right reasons, they put that ego aside and they allow people to be like, there's no, I want to say this, but there's no bootlickers in this work. There's no room for it.
Yeah.
There has to be, and I create a safe space, for people to be able to say what they mean and stand up for what they're saying in front of a CEO so that he can hear it or she can hear it and be like, you know what? Holy crap. We've never had these conversations before. And CEO's job, of course, is to sit up on high and make sure that, all the things are moving, but sometimes they don't see the forest for the trees, or they don't hear what's really, really important down below. And I've seen it on both several occasions where it'll go one of two ways. Either the CEO will be just like, oh, yes, we definitely need to change that. Holy crap, I had no idea. And then there's the, no, but I'll tell you why we're not going to, because of this, and this. And then people are just like, oh, because they didn't have the vision.
Yeah, or the background information.
Yeah.
And very often when we do these workshops, it's a couple of insights we've had. One is we meet with the CEO beforehand and have a conversation, walk them through the process and explain that we leave egos at the door. So when they come, they need to be open-minded, even though they may not agree with what's being said, that it will craft itself. The other insight is that we find that when we're using virtual, people are more comfortable sharing thoughts than physical. So we found that when we do these sessions using Mirror, that people are willing to put things out that they normally wouldn't have put. So it's interesting how technology has allowed us.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just in our situation, technology has allowed people to feel more free to kind of voice their opinions because they're not sitting next to the president or to this CMO or the VP of finance. And so that's an interesting dynamic. So listen, I enjoyed reading your book. I found some great insights. One of the key lessons I learned out of that is, how do you evaluate? In your book, you talk about, that 6 or 7 different factors of how you evaluate the relevancy of your position. I think that's fantastic, because ultimately those are the same factors that a year after you've launched through your rebrand, you go back and evaluate. Yeah. You use consumer research. And once you've done the playbook, you kind of validate that with external stakeholders.
Yeah, and real life.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not done just in a bubble as well, but as you, I think the very first phase of the brand playbook is, here it is. This is what we've come up with. Now we go put it in the crucible and see how it plays out, knowing that as these different things happen, we are making informed choices about how we tell a story or how we show up. And when things aren't working, it allows us to be like, okay, is it not working because of this or because of that? Are we trying to be too clever, or are we, you know what I mean? And if everything is rooted in truth and clarity, oftentimes that's where things go off the rails. We're not being as clear as we should be or can be, and we're maybe not being as truthful as we thought we should be. We're trying to take a shortcut to somewhere that.
And do you find, though, that sometimes you're doing this exercise and in their mind, they're into the executional mode? This is going to be a campaign. I'm thinking campaign versus, because there's a big difference between an advertising campaign position versus a corporate position. There's a link to both. The campaign should link to, but often the exercises for our campaign. And you've run into that situation where you're doing a brainstorming, developing the playbook, and they're really thinking execution campaign.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I guess what I always go back to help them root is that the campaigns will show up as if by magic once you do that work. Once you do the sort of the business brand work, once you know the story of who you are, your genesis, you can go all sorts of different places campaign wise with it, right? Because you're always coming back to center, and you can have a lot more fun in your campaigns than if you have that, that home base to go to.
Yeah. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I was going to ask you one question. Yeah. What is the one thing you would like the audience to remember that's really important for them?
I think the most important thing is that it's actually not as complicated as you might think it is. Branding can seem like a big hairy beast, but it's not. It is a fairly simple thing with a bunch of little pieces to it that, if you know what to do and you can just follow that, follow the model, whoever's model, like mine, I think is a good one to just sort of get you from how to find your story, how to shape your story so that you can then share your story. If you follow those little pieces, then before you know it, you've got something that's much more valuable and memorable than anything else on the planet, especially if you're working in a commoditized market like roofing, for example, siding or whatever. You have so much fun if you own the truth and clarity of your business.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed reading your book. I'm recommending highly those listening to the podcast to go out and buy it. You can get it at Amazon and a variety of other locations. And is there a website that they can go to, Michael, to...
Oh, thanks, JP. Yeah, go to BrandJitsu.com, and the book is available if you're in Canada. It's on like in Indigos. You can go in there and grab a coffee. You might even find a signed one because I've been riding a motorcycle across Canada, signing every one that I can find. Independent bookstores down south, you can get it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, of course. But if you need to know more, BrandJitsu.com.
Fantastic. Michael, thank you very much for your time. This was fun. Thank you.
JP, you're the man. I love it. Thank you so much for doing this takeover. This has been a privilege.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. Hey, if you're an artist, scientist, entrepreneur, or business owner who wants a smooth and proven method to find, shape, and share your story with the world, head on over to BrandJitsu.com and order a copy of my book, Brand Jitsu, Move Your Brand from Meh to Memorable. I've been your host, Michael Dargie, and this has been the RebelRebel Podcast. It's a podcast for creative rebels and entrepreneurs all over the world. And hey, if you're a rebel or you know a rebel, head on over to the RebelRebelPodcast.com and fill out the guest request form. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.